I'm Tyler Moore. I'm the Director of Aero Supply Assurance. I've been at Aero for 23 years. Aero Supply Assurance is Aero's business focusing on solving supplier's problem and the customer's problem when a discontinuance event happens. We invest in products from the supplier to make sure that customers have it for the next 10 or 15 years. So why is obsolescence suddenly such a hot topic for everybody? Over the last 20 years, customers now on the demand side are putting more and more and more electronics in everything they build, and we read about that daily. In the last 3-4 years, though, we've been hit with a tsunami of merger and acquisition activity. That M&A activity now affects half of the market for semiconductors. As I said at FOMM in Amsterdam last year, the first thing these suppliers get to after that merger is to start rationalizing product lines, and that means end of life or discontinuance. It's a normal part of any M&A process. We've just never seen it happen in this magnitude before in our industry. And so we thought it would increase by about threefold, and that's exactly what the data said. In fact, we now think it might be happening even faster than we thought it would. We thought it would take a while for this to take hold. These are big, complex operations, and we thought it would take maybe till 2017, 2018, 2019 when we really saw the peak of discontinuance activity. The evidence we've seen is that this is happening much, much faster than we originally anticipated. We thought that we would go from maybe 3% or 5% of the total market in terms of how much value there was in obsolescence. And we think it's gone to that 5% level already. Obsolescence management is only about risk management. Very often, people focus on price. They focus on long-term delivery schedules from their suppliers, frequently from their distributors. And though those are very, very important, it's the availability issue, the availability risk that needs to be central in their understanding. Companies need to focus on a full end-to-end understanding of where these parts are used in their business and how that could potentially impact them if they can't have them anymore. If they have to go to the open market, which is a rational decision, they put themselves at a different type of risk, counterfeit risk. But in general, the biggest issue they have to contend with is the risk of not being able to get their hands on the parts when they need them, and the enterprise losing money or going out of business as a result of that shortage. So here's the advice I'd give to customers that are wrestling with obsolescence management. First of all, understand that you don't have the full picture. Customers are dealing in a world where information is asymmetric. They understand the price that they used to pay. They understand the supply chain forecast as they see it today. But what they don't understand is how many other customers are using this part? How is this part being used? What other industries is it being used in? Understand the full ecosystem that now represents the only market for those parts. This requires that companies focus attention and data management systems, data collecting systems, on really understanding what's going on in the market for those parts and understanding the intrinsic technology behind those parts. When I say intrinsic technology, can it be substituted? Is this something that was built for a single purpose, and your chances of being able to do a redesign or second source are very, very small? Or is this a commodity part where you're likely to find a number of different sources? On the market risk side, how will customers know whether or not they're the last one using any one of these parts? There's no way for them to understand that today. And so we think we can help them in that regard. So the role of senior managers within the customer base is really critical. First of all, it's to give sponsorship to the buyer. For years, maybe decades, we've put the buyer in the hot seat to make these decisions with limited amount of information, and in some respects with incentive systems that sort of incentivize them to do things that are contrary to the interests of the business. So the first thing managers need to understand is this is not a problem you want to put on the back of buyers. The next piece is to begin to take this risk awareness mentality as well as a risk management and measurement mentality. In the past, I've talked about a couple of tools from ISO where you can begin as a business to get an understanding of how to manage and recognize risk and then how to respond to it. And it's that last part that I think is really important. And I'm starting to see really innovative companies, although these are companies that are building products that have been around for 10, 15, 20 years, so you might not equate them with innovative product, but very innovative processes for decision making so that when they collect all this data and they get to that final point, it's not the buyer that's making the decision, it's a group or it's systems, and they're doing it based on good information collected with discipline, relying on data, and not on a gut hunch by somebody that sadly doesn't have all the tools to make those decisions. So we're starting to see some great best practices emerge out of this necessity from a lot of customers. Not surprisingly, they're coming out of customers in the aerospace and defense markets, but also out of the industrial market. In the past, we've seen some very, very strong support mechanisms within automotive, but I'm going to sort of set that aside because I think their model's a bit different than most of us here. But in industrial and aerospace and defense, we're seeing a couple of things. First of all, as I've said, they've taken this decision at a system level and they've taken it out of the hands of the buyer. The next thing they've done is they've begun to balance between price, carrying costs, and enterprise risk. We've seen big household names really up against the wall from an earnings or a financial performance basis based on these decisions. So they've started to recognize the real impact that these events can have on their business. And what's really interesting is now they're starting to build systems and decision-making processes and systems that help their people see risk clearly, understand choices, and then systematically decide what to do. So it really is going back to a reliance on data, an understanding of the gaps in your visibility to that data, and then a prescribed method of action. And I think the ones that take it to that last point are the ones that are starting to get ahead of this. And I'll say one thing. Every customer that I talk to that has that as their foundation now has a corresponding issue relative to inventory. And this is something that we as an industry still need to work on. Better mechanisms for dealing with what is very often a glut of inventory. But it's necessary, and in some cases, it's a matter of survival that they have this inventory. But I think that's the thing we're going to be talking about next year and the next couple of years is how do we better help customers or markets or groups of customers deal with that monstrous investment that is in many cases imperative. We really look at this problem as having two sides. We will look every day at how we can help suppliers. Most of the people here today or engaged in this issue are on the user side, but people need to understand this is a huge problem for the supply base. And helping the supply base do these events in a safe, managed way really does help customers, but it especially helps our suppliers. It makes sure that more customers have access to this product down the road, and it makes sure that the suppliers are able to do this in a way that doesn't create some weird anomalies in terms of what's actually out there. And the fact that they engage with us at all, I think, is a best practice we're seeing from most suppliers in the semiconductor space at this point. But maybe more importantly, what can we do for customers? So beyond the major investments that we've made in these products over the last 2 decades, we continue to work on ways to share our understanding of the market with customers, help them to complete that picture of what's going on in the market. For example, they might understand what their price history was. They might understand sort of what the forecast is. Forecasts are always a little problematic, but they have no idea what the open market activities or demand around those parts might be, and they really don't understand whether they're one of 100 or one of 1 user for these parts. And like I've said, those are elements of risk that we're trying to help customers understand more clearly. At the same time, we're working hard to build financial tools that they can pick and choose from that meet both their financial capabilities or requirements as well as their risk management capabilities and requirements. And we think that this combination of better information on the front end, allowing better sort of decision making on their part, combined with a flexible set of tools to fund or hold or even vent surplus down the road are really going to be good answers to what's going to be the real big question in the next couple of years is now how do we manage this huge elephant of inventory, which I think is going to be inevitable. So at Arrow, given the range of capabilities that we have accumulated, created over the last many decades, we really can tell an end-to-end story around product lifecycle. It begins with product development, and people tend not to think very much about obsolescence when you're just bringing in a new part, but Silicon Expert is a critical part of that. SE can help your engineers understand what is the lifecycle expectancy of that particular device. And as an organization, you need to understand, do we want to build in parts that might only be expected to be around for another 5 years? So all the way back at NPI, throughout the supply chain, we have global supply chain capabilities with a full suite of value-added capabilities. This idea that we can, at the NPI stage, help customers design in products and then bring it all the way through the supply chain. But supply chain doesn't end at a device implementation or manufacturing standpoint. It includes the provisioning and the connection now of that device to software and services in the cloud, which are becoming increasingly important to our customers that are building IoT-oriented solutions. But underlying all of that is the ability to monitor the life cycle status of those parts So now you've started from NPI, we're through the cloud, we're all the way up to the cloud where we're provisioning for cellular services, other radio services, and data services. But then when that component EOL is finally announced, things like Silicon Expert for the announcement, Aero Supply Assurance to make sure that parts are provisioned, and our partners at Converge become a very, very important part of how we're going to make sure customers have access to those parts for the next many years, as well as how they're able to reconcile some of the financial challenges that long-term holding creates. So from the sensor implementation at NPI to the dealing with the sunset of these parts all the way through supply assurance, Converge, and some of the financial tools we have, it really is the only end-to-end solution for customers in the market. So it's been really interesting. I've been involved with FOMM from the very beginning, Future of Obsolescence Management. I can remember I got a phone call from some new colleagues here in Amsterdam, and it was interesting to me that people from the open market side of the business had given such an incredible amount of deep thought to this problem. And over the last 3 years, I've watched this event grow into something that now is anticipated by the customer base as a place where they can come, listen to real and practical solutions, things that are actually happening today. There is very, very little of, I use the term shoulding at this event. There is very, very little sort of discussion around here's what we should do, or more often, here's what somebody else should do. At FOMM, what I tend to hear is, here are the things we've tried that didn't work. Here's the things that we've tried that did work. Here are the things that we're testing today. And we've exposed some of those things in the past, and those capabilities are now a reality. And it's getting that feedback from the user base at the same time that we're sharing ideas about how we think we can actually solve this problem that has made FOMM really, really important in my mind. I want to emphasize that as a distributor sort of sponsored event, I can understand why customers are sort of naturally maybe skeptical about, well, why there and not some other sort of government-sponsored event. And I think the difference is because distributors are eminently practical people. We live in a world between the customers that have this amazing idea and the realities of a market where I only have so much money to go around and I only have so much time to get it done. And so we tend to be really good at sorting those conflicts out and finding that place in the middle where real beneficial activity takes place. And that's what I see at FOMM. And I will say also that it's also the place where I've met some of the best hosts in the entire market. So I'll be speaking at FOMM in Los Angeles in a couple of weeks, and I'm really excited to talk about some of these capabilities that we've created. And I'll be sharing some of these dashboards that we've begun to talk about. And these dashboards are meant to balance that asymmetry between what a customer knows and then the blind spots, so that when they do go to make a decision, at least they've got data that is based on market facts and intrinsic technology facts, and they can begin to layer that on their own efforts to build an internal process that is sort of end-to-end within their own business. And I'll be talking about that in LA, and I'm looking forward to it.